Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, we got a treat today, and it's a bit of a build-up. So let me start with this. Gulfport has a lot of special communities, a lot of historic communities. It would take several shows to tell the stories of all the historic communities that are part of Gulfport. This is true of every community across coastal Mississippi. Each has its own special sense of place, and it's these collection of communities that make coastal Mississippi such a great place to live. But one is a particular neighborhood that is quite a historic neighborhood, I might add, in Gulfport that has been referred to as the historic district of Gulfport, 2nd Street. And let me tell you about where it is if you don't know, because people who from other communities may not necessarily know, but it starts about a mile east of downtown Gulfport. It runs south of the CSX Railroad, and it's about a block off the beach. So this is an area, like so many in coastal Mississippi, that was challenged very significantly by Hurricane Katrina. I remember as publisher of the Sun-Herald, all the stories we did about the recovery efforts that were taking place in the 2nd Street neighborhood or 2nd Street community. Here's something from the Sun-Herald that I ran across. This was written not long after the storm, and it was sort of a subtext to a bigger story about 2nd Street. But the headline on this, it said, "What Katrina Did." And it said this: Katrina's strong winds and storm surge decimated most of the homes on historic 2nd Street in Gulfport. Most of the homes that Katrina did not flatten have major structural damage. And this was just right after Hurricane Katrina. Later in 2007, Tracy Dash wrote this at the Sun-Herald. Hurricane Katrina destroyed most of the homes on Gulfport 2nd Street, but the storm didn't destroy the community spirit displayed every Sunday when neighbors there get together for lunch. It was just a great telling of the effort, the incredible effort to get to the point that they were in 2007. Not nearly recovered yet, but it was a progress report, so to speak. And what you saw in that story, incidentally, was the spirit of those who live on 2nd Street. They had such a spirit to want to rebuild their community. And I would say that part of the 2nd Street story, the spirit of those who live on 2nd Street, has been one of the more often written about things here in coastal Mississippi as it relates to Hurricane Katrina. But what that story tells you, that spirit tells you, is that what so many of us learned so deep in our souls after Katrina, and that is that buildings do not make a community. It's the people that make the community. So once those people from 2nd Street sort of identified with that reality, they weren't willing to move. Oh, certainly some had to move temporarily away, waiting for temporary housing to pop up, or maybe their structural corrections or fixes on their house. But at the end of the day, the resurgence and renewal of 2nd Street after Katrina has been one of the more inspiring stories to watch. The people there, like so many other people across coastal Mississippi, really define resilience. My friend Frank Willen posted something recently from eMotivational Spark. It's just a Facebook page that shares motivational thoughts. And here is one. I don't know who said this, but it said this: when someone says you can't do it twice and take pictures. I just thought that was perfect. If you think about the pictures these days of 2nd Street, it's really an exclamation point to that quote, that the people of 2nd Street proved that they can not only come back, but they can literally renew their community in ways that are truly inspiring. And they did take the pictures for sure. They did it twice and they took the pictures. I'm really thrilled today to have with me my old friend Billy Ruble and my dear friend Matt McDonnell, who are the co-founders of the 2nd Street Social Club. We're going to talk about an upcoming Mardi Gras parade, but we're really just going to have a conversation about 2nd Street and its significance and the people there and all the activities that these two guys have been involved in. How you guys doing?
Fine, thank you.
Hey, you know what, Ricky, you talked about doing it and taking a picture twice.
we were told, or I was told during the pandemic, that we couldn't have any gatherings on 2nd Street, and I just moved there, and I wanted to meet a bunch of the cool people that lived there and that I'd heard about. And that's kind of how the 2nd Street Social Club got started, was we were told we couldn't do it. So we planned on how to do it when we could do it. And then now we're taking a picture twice.
Hey, you know what's interesting, Matt and Billy, and Billy, I'll come to you in a second. But what's interesting is that, Matt, you were over in Ocean Springs, a councilman in Ocean Springs. You've been at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Coliseum and Convention Center all these years. You're regular on the show to talk about that. But when you moved to 2nd Street, you sort of found a special place, didn't you?
I did. And, it was hard leaving Ocean Springs after 32 years and serving 24 years as a member of the Board of Aldermen there and making impact to the city, particularly the downtown area. But when I decided to move, it was best for me and my family to get a fresh look at some other things. And it took a lot of coaxing to get my wife to move. But when we rolled down 2nd Street, she said, "This is where I want to build our final home, and this will be the last place that we move to." And we've loved every minute of it. The people there are incredible. The views, the scenery, just the whole ambience of the street, plus the history that I have learned so much about in this year and a half process of creating, along with Billy Ruble, the 2nd Street Social Club. And Billy's affectionately known as the mayor of 2nd Street, and there's a reason, because he knows just about everybody on the street.
Well, as he knows, Billy and I kind of grew up together. We grew up in Bayou View, and we both went to the Bayou View school system and Gulfport East, and we've always just had tremendous admiration for one another. But if I look back in Billy's past, I think about this, that I don't think I know a more popular person. I mean, Billy literally is one of the most popular people in Gulfport. And I think it's because, Billy, because your personality is so vivacious and you have a great way of connecting with people. Similar, it reminds me of my brother-in-law, Mac Harper, who you know well. But you remember names and phone numbers and stories about people and all that. That's what it takes to connect with people. But you've always loved people, haven't you, my friend?
I sure have. Bubba, I've known you, Ricky.
No, Bubba, you call me Bubba for sure.
Since you were Bubba. I've known you 50 years, which that's telling our age. You grew up on the corner of Quincy, Bayou Circle, and 54th Street at 5312 Quincy Avenue. across the street from the Whites. Next door to, I don't know, but then Nancy Pippin, the Morses, and at the very end, our good friend Raymond Seal. And then John and Gemma lived across the street.
Well, we had that neighborhood was awesome, man, because you had Gordon Myrick and you had Roy Anderson and Monty Simpkins and Farrell Allman. I mean, you just go around that block. It was just a lot of dynamic families came out of that area.
The block. The Benefields, the Williams, the Hopkins, the Flanagans, the Coreys, the Clements. I mean,
McMurphys.
The Sinopolis, which are also known as the Sinopolis.
Right, of course.
Bill Dukes.
So many of them. It's just a great story. But you were over on Popular Circle, right? Did I remember that right?
It was Popular, right? We were on Popular Circle, and we had Woody Bailey, the Bells, the Allens, the Stanleys, the Scarboroughs, the Holders, the Rubles, the Whites, the Allgoods, the Dabbs, Ben Young. We had a neighborhood. There were some characters over there.
And so many of those names are still very significant names in the coast of Mississippi today. It was, Billy, I miss those days in Bayou View. Social media and the way of the world and the polarized world that we live in today. We were kind of raised in a sterile environment in a lot of ways, weren't we?
We were. Bayou View was a classic. I mean, we had a good life out there.
And 2nd Street actually is a lot like Bayou View, isn't it?
It is. I didn't grow up on 2nd Street. I was a Bayou View guy, and after the storm, I purchased some property down there. But my father did grow up in that neighborhood district. He was born in 23, so he spent a lot of my historical information I get is from Bill Ruble.
And Ricky, some of our sponsors, we've got a lot of sponsors that have gotten behind this group because of how we present things and the people that have joined and the fun that they have at our events. A lot of them grew up on Second Street, and some of them still live on Second Street. And I go back to the Milner family and the Bertucci family. All those guys were on Second Street, and some of them lost their homes, and some of them rebuilt, some of them didn't. But the roots run real deep on Second Street, and that isn't just from the oak trees.
You know what's interesting? I went and reading about Second Street, and we don't have the time to go through the whole history because its connection to Gulfport's history and when it started to evolve as a community. I mean, it's a really fascinating story. But on the other side, I came across the National Registry of Historic Places registration form about Second Street that describes the architecture of Second Street. I'll sing a few bars from that when we come back on the other side. But we're with Matt McDonnell and Billy Ruble, and we'll continue our conversation about the emergence of the Second Street Social Club. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast Vue. We're having a conversation about the Second Street community, and eventually we'll talk about the emergence of the Second Street Social Club that Billy Ruble and Mac McDonnell co-founded. And so that's a cool story in and of itself. But what I was referring to in this application that I found, it's let me get back up here to the top. It's an application for the National Register of Historic Places, and it was submitted, and it had a listing of the various styles of homes on Second Street. So when you go down Second Street today, you have a sense that, this is kind of a new feel. This is somebody restored something that was really special there. And you feel this eclecticness of it. That's what you feel. There's certainly tremendous history that has been restored. I remember after Katrina, when we did the charrettes with the 100 architects and planners as part of the Governor's Commission, Andreas Dwani, the famed architect and planner who is the father of new urbanism, he said of us that if you have a column left, just a column left, rebuild it, because so much of our history was going to get lost. Well, in this application, it lists the architectural styles that are represented in what they call the Second Street Historic District. And I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to read a few to you. Craftsman, Bungalow, Vernacular, Colonial Revival, Vernacular Bungalow, Queen Anne, Folk Victorian, Ranch, Neo-Eclectic, Post-Katrina Coastal, Neo Bungalow, Tudor, Commercial, Vernacular. I mean, the list just goes on from there. But what that tells you, that people put a lot of thought into the architecture of Second Street, that it was continue to represent this incredible connection it had back to sort of the advent of Gulfport, which Gulfport at the port, the pine forest and exporting those, and the role that all of our forefathers had in the founding of Gulfport. Gulfport was, Second Street was, if you look back in the history, Second Street and Broadmoor and those areas, Seward City, which is across the tracks, all sort of began to evolve at about the same time. But Billy, you've got a connection back to all that, don't you?
Yes, sir, because my dad was grown here. We grew up here, and where Regions Bank is in downtown Gulfport, my dad was born right there at King Daughters Hospital, next to where John Gemma and St. Peter's used to be before the casino bought them out and whatever. But yeah, my dad's family, where Regions Bank is, Ms. Ruble, my grandmother, who I never met, she had years ago, before they had apartment complexes, they had flop houses or boarding houses. And Ms. Ruble had a 3-story house where Regions is, right by the bank, right across from the Daily Herald, Bubba. And
yeah.
Anyway, Ms. Ruble had 3 stories. On the top, the Ruble family lived. The second floor was rooms around it. And on the bottom, she served 3 hots a day. So anyway, yeah, my dad was born in 23 in downtown Gulfport. So I do have a little history. And he was big on telling me everything. I soaked it up.
Hey, it's interesting you mentioned John Gemma. I mean, they were also raised across the street from me, Mr. Gemma. I remember going in. He had the dealership there on Highway 90, and Liz and John and Mario. Yeah, So gosh, man, it's so interesting how it all comes back to you. But I remember walking in their house, and behind their bar had a picture of Bob Hope standing with John Gemma. He was quite the character for sure.
Yes,
But we saw a lot of history. But, coming back to 2nd Street, though, it's incredible what that community did to rebuild after Katrina. And, Billy, what brought you there?
that's a hard one. I'll tell you what, after my mother passed away in 2013, I was either going to stay out in Bellevue where I lived, or I was going to build a house on 2nd Street. And I'll never forget this. I called my friend Mike Cassidy, and if you know Mike, they started Cassidy and Associates in 1947, and they closed out in 2017, but they still were bought up by a company they were smart enough to keep the name Cassidy Acadia. But long story short, sometimes I get lost and get ahead of myself, but I called Cassidy and said, should I build a house out there on Poplar Circle where I grew up, or 2nd Street? No hesitation, 2nd Street. And I'm glad I bought a lot there, and I built right behind Bradford O'Keefe Funeral Home. And I'm also 2 houses up from my brother Norman, which I don't know.
Well, what's interesting, it is it's sort of the city hall now, isn't it, for 2nd Street, since you're the mayor of 2nd Street?
That's what Matt calls it.
There's a lot of meetings that have happened there on that front porch, and actually kind of the birth of the 2nd Street Social Club really took shape right there. But, when he was talking about living behind the funeral home, 2nd Street has its own central business district, which is really cool in the middle of an old historic neighborhood. You've got Bradford O'Keefe. You've got Rip Daniels' place, the Almanette, which is a wonderful bed and breakfast, great food. He's now got a little outdoor patio where he does live entertainment occasionally. You've got Rob Stinson over there. It was Salute. You've got the Chimneys. You've got the Marriott Hotel. All of those businesses fit in like a glove without causing any hardship to any of the neighbors, and they bring tax revenue and create jobs for people that live and play in Gulfport. And yet it's right there in our front yards, and it's a great compliment to 2nd Street. It really is.
Hey, have you guys done a census? I'm actually curious. How many of the residents of 2nd Street were there before, and of course still there after Katrina, and how many are new to the community? Do you know that number?
That would be a Billy question.
I don't, but there are a lot did not come back. I know that my family, my brother Norman, the house he's in was built in 1923. My dad also had a house. His parents, in addition to living on the corner of 22nd Avenue and 14th Street, where Regions Bank is, my dad grew up on 18th Avenue, and right behind that, my little brother Norman lives. But my aunt built a house there in 23, so my family has been there forever. And I stayed at Norman's house until about 6 o'clock that morning, and left during Katrina.
Wow!
It was really cold.
Well, there are a lot of heroic and incredibly courageous stories of people who stayed there. Unfortunately. Like I stayed at my house on Back Bay, not probably, for sure the poorest decision I ever made in my life. But and thank God most of us lived to tell about it. Unfortunately, some didn't live to tell about it. But that was a tough time, wasn't it, Billy?
It was. And let me interrupt you. I didn't answer your question very well. How many people have come back? There's a few. I think of Mike Cassidy. I think of the Barretts. Peter Barrett, Scotty Barrett, Gargiulo, who just passed away, Shannon Weatherly.
The Burnham
family has 9 kids, and the youngest one is a year younger than me. The oldest one's probably 25. Anyway, long story short, there were 9 Burnham kids that grew up on 2nd Street, and I think we have 6 of them that have come back, and they love the community, just the feeling of community and community pride. And anyway, back to
our queen last year was Peggy Ryland. And Peggy Ryland, the home she sits on, that dirt has been in their family since 1900. Okay, see, these are things that I didn't know about. I've lived there for almost 4 years now. But every week when I meet new people that are joining the club, or I see them at a club function, I learned this stuff, and it's fascinating, and it makes me even more proud to say that my address is on 2nd Street in Gulfport. It really does.
Well, again, it's one of the original outgrowths of downtown Gulfport. I mean, it was a place where a lot of the forefathers, the initial settlers of Gulfport lived. A lot of the leaders lived initially, and it grew from there. But you don't realize that history till you tell a story like Peggy Ryland's family and how far back they go and how they kept it in the family. That's part of one of the most interesting parts of the story, is they're able to kind of keep it together over all these years, isn't it?
Well, and you see that to where families are passing land down from generation to generation, and homes are being remodeled or torn down, and new homes are being built on the same dirt. Just the property that I owned, a former United States Senator, Pat Harrison, everybody's heard of the Pat Harrison Waterway and different public works projects with his name on it. He grew up at that piece of dirt that I live on at 711 2nd Street. So somebody asked me, he said, "You're a politician, you're moving to where a politician lives." I said, "There's no connections, believe me. I'm not running for anything, man. I'm done."
Again, so I mean, literally, you could probably go house by house, plot by plot, and find an incredible story that reaches way back into coastal Mississippi's history. Hey, Billy, before we get too far away, in the next section, we'll talk more about the emergence of the 2nd Street Social Club. But tell me about your business, Billy.
Well, years ago, I cut grass for a living when I was a kid. And instead of going to McDonald's, there you go, Tractor Work by Billy Ruble. Anyway, as a kid, I cut grass, and then I went to Ole Miss for a couple of years, and my dad, after some C's and D's and occasional B, I came on home, and I went to JD, and that's where I had the pleasure of seeing you.
Yes.
46 seconds.
Hey, anyway, let's do this. We'll pick up at JD right there on the other side. We'll hear the rest of Billy's stories that relates to the business he's in today, Tractor Work by Billy Ruble. He does major demolition work and other stuff. And then we'll talk about how Billy and Matt came together around this idea to form the 2nd Street Social Club. That is, it's really turned into some neat events and a great way to bring the community together. So we'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friends Billy Ruble and Matt McDonnell, and we're going to talk more here shortly about the emergence of the 2nd Street Social Club that has come out of that terrific historic community. But before we went to break, we were talking a little bit about Billy's business and the business he's in. But let me tell you a quick story about Billy before we go any further. I had this, Matt and I have been on the show many times before. We've had numerous opportunities to chat here on Coast Vue about the incredible work that he does at the Coast Coliseum. And I have, along the way, we've chatted about the 2nd Street Social Club that has emerged as this cool entity that brings the community together, that gives people an opportunity to be engaged in that community. And so fast forward a little bit, there were some posts about the upcoming Mardi Gras parade, and I sent Matt a note, and I said, we need to get together. You and Billy and I need to get together. Well, the first mention of this to Billy was absolutely not. There's absolutely no way he's going to do a radio show with us. And I sent him a note and just said, "Trust me, Billy, trust me." And next thing I hear, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Well, I mean, I was a little bit surprised he didn't want to do it. First of all, he's one of the most popular people in Gulfport. Secondly, he is the mayor of 2nd Street, and then lastly, of course, he's a walking history book for this part of Gulfport. So with that said, Billy, I'm thrilled that you decided to be on with me, and obviously the listeners can already decide with me that it was a good decision that you made to join me. But you were talking about you went to JD and you went on to finish your degree, but you can pick it up from there.
Yeah, well, I told you I went to Ole Miss, and after lackluster performance there, Dad said no more. So I came back and did like everybody did. I went to JD for a couple of years or a few semesters, and then I went back to Southern Miss. Paid for it myself and graduated. It's funny how that works out, but I went to Madison, Mississippi, and I lived there almost 20 years. But I had a professional coat and tie job for a short period, and I got a little sidetracked, and got back into the grass cutting business. I bought a tractor, and that evolved into another tractor, and I now am in the demo business. I demo houses, buildings, take up Katrina slabs, move dirt, whatever it takes to do with heavy machinery.
Yeah, I see all your posts, and it's clear that you're pretty efficient at it because you get called to do it often. And when you're called, it usually means some progress is going to happen. Clearly that's what that means. And just kind of become your niche, hasn't it?
It sure has. In addition to now, I'm a podcaster and a promoter.
Yeah, welcome to the Billy Ruble Show, everybody. Yeah. And the people from Gulfport will know this. One last thing, Billy, you've been involved in the Gulfport Yacht Club for your entire life, and so a lot of the connections with Gulfport come through your involvement at the Yacht Club, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think my dad too, he was the Commodore in '65, and I've just been down there part of my life. I've had a few. I've gotten out a few times. Maybe asked to leave a few times, but I'm back in good standing, and it's all good, as they say.
Well, that's everybody's got a story, right? Everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
and Billy's got his as well. So Matt, coming over to you, you moved to the community, and I literally remember the day you moved into your house, the post that you posted, and how proud you were to be there, the view that you had from your house. Just a sense of not just accomplishment for your family, but the sense that you found a place to, as you put it, permanently put your anchor. But that really meant that to you, didn't it?
It did. I mean, I had a lot of great years and got a lot accomplished and really had fabulous friends and relationships over in Ocean Springs. But when my wife and I decided to move, we wanted a place that we could call home and that we felt comfortable when we finally get to retire, which is not that much longer. So that was met beyond any shadow of a doubt by the move to 2nd Street. But what's happened since we've gotten there, and it's no surprise to the people that know me, I like to get involved. I got involved, and that's why I ran for public office in Ocean Springs. I will not run for public office ever again. So anybody in Gulfport that thinks that was my reason to move there, they're dead wrong. I will not run for public office in the city of Gulfport or anywhere else again. I've done my time.
You will be divorced.
Yeah, my wife probably would leave me. But nonetheless, though, I can still get involved, and that's really what the 2nd Street Social Club allowed me to do. Not only did it give me something to focus on and sink my teeth into and hone some of my marketing and event-related skills, it also allowed me to meet all of these people y'all been talking about for the last 30 minutes. And while I don't know a third of the people, maybe not even 20% of the people Billy knows, the 20% that he has introduced me to are some of the nicest, most interesting characters that have a lot of history in the city of Gulfport.
How'd you meet Billy?
I'll let Billy tell that story.
Well, now Matt would ride by. My good friend Mark Slogel, who I want to give a shout out to because he listens to you every day. Anyway, hello, Slogel. Matt, during the pandemic, it's about the time Matt got here. Little pandemic was in
20, and I got here in 19.
Okay. In October of 20, Matt would always pass by, and I'd be sitting on my front porch in the afternoons. He'd want to know if I had a cure for the coronavirus. Well, anyway, one day during the middle of cruising the coast, I got on my golf cart by myself, loaded up my ice chest with a couple of cold ones, and I rode down. I live in the 1700 block, and he lives in the 700 block. So obviously I rode 10 blocks down the sidewalk, and I got down to right where Matt lives, and where he lives right behind where Terry Green, who owns the casino with Rick Carter, he was sitting right on his sidewalk, so I couldn't even get by. So I pulled up and I said, "Hey, Mac, how you doing?" And we sat down and started talking. And I had never talked to Matt. He knew who I was, and I knew who he was. Go figure. Anyway, he knew who my brother John was. But, Matt, I'm going to defer to you because we were talking. We sat there and talked about an hour about 69 Camaro or whatever. And
well, the 20, if you remember, Ricky, the 2020 cruising was a bit abbreviated because of COVID, but it still happened, which was a good thing for the coast to have that event still take place. So Billy and I kind of struck up a conversation, and I told him about my idea about wanting to do some bands in my backyard and invite some of my friends and some of the new people I'd met in Gulfport over. But Billy Hughes, the mayor of Gulfport, says absolutely not. There won't be any gatherings. We can't have these gatherings because of the spread of the COVID. So that kind of got us thinking, well, we can still plan, and when the COVID's over, we're going to do something. And that's really how the 2nd Street Social Club got born. It started with the Mardi Gras parade, no floats, golf carts, vintage cars, bicycles, side-by-sides, ATVs. We hadn't had a riding lawnmower yet, but we will accept it if it won't.
We do have a tractor.
We do have an orange tractor, and that orange tractor does a lot of good. It leads the parade, and we are able to collect big canned goods for Feed My Sheep. That is our charity that we have selected. We only went with one where we could have some impact, and that charity now in less than a year's time, we've collected over $5,000 for that charity, and probably a half a semi-load of big canned goods, and we're going to do it again during Mardi Gras because there's a lot of generous people that live on 2nd Street. A lot of. Well,
you had their first one last year. Yep. In February of 22, and as you mentioned earlier, Peggy Ryland, who had this great historical connection back at 2nd Street, where's your queen? And it was just kind of low-key, neat thing.
Billy Hughes was our king. We figured if we made the real mayor king, we'd get a lot of love. Well,
and, of course, he lives on the beach at the corner of Highway 90 and Hughes. He backs up to 2nd Street, so he has a huge vested interest in this effort.
We have dubbed the 2nd Street neighborhood a district. And you were talking about the boundaries. It's really simple. Federal Courthouse, south of the tracks to Highway 90, Federal Courthouse to Centennial Plaza. That is our 2nd Street neighborhood district.
Yeah. Well, Matt, what's cool about what you did, and you mentioned it, you've had a history at the Coast Coliseum as literally an entrepreneur, as we've talked about many times, you don't get free money coming your way if you don't make money. You have to. Your P&L is your lifeblood, which means you have to run it like a business. It's not like a governmental entity.
Right.
And so you have to be incredibly entrepreneurial. You have to be a little bit Barnum and Bailey, and you are. And so those are the skills.
That is a compliment to me. P.T. Barnum was probably the greatest promoter that ever lived. So that's a compliment. Thank you.
Well, I meant it to be. And so you bring that skill set to this community that you're new to as a way of sort of bringing everybody together, and the evolution has been incredible to watch it happen. So you guys had this idea. Who named it, incidentally?
I think it was really a joint venture, and because I remember telling Billy, though, I said, Billy, this is going to be I won't say easy, but it's going to work because we're taking a street, 2nd Street, and we're creating a brand out of it, and that's really what we did. 2nd Street, everybody knows where it is. They knows what the ambience is, the character of it. And we developed a brand that does special events that people want to be at, they want to join, and they want to have fun, and we keep doing it.
I think it's incredible. For the final segment, which we're coming up to after this break, we'll talk about the evolution of this organization and the upcoming Mardi Gras parade. We'll see you after this.
All right. Thank you.
Speaking of amazing entrepreneurs, Frank Willem, who posts a lot of quotes on his Facebook page, a good friend of mine. He's been on the show before. Great entrepreneur. But, this quote, when someone says you can't do it twice and take pictures. That's not just a story about 2nd Street's emergence after Hurricane Katrina, but it's really the story of the 2nd Street Social Club's emergence, because you kind of were told you can't do it initially. And you were cool, but in the meantime, you sort of got your homework done and moved forward. Like we were saying during the break, your marketing and promotion capabilities with Billy's knowledge of people and connection to people, marrying those two things together, really turned out to be a pretty amazing organization, didn't it?
It's been the most unique partner I've ever had in my entire career, for sure. But you know what, though? When Billy asked me, he said, how do you think we'll do? And I told him, I said, I think we'll do 50. Go ahead, Billy. Tell them what you said.
And I said, no, I got a lot more confidence in myself than that. We'll get over 100 for sure. Well, we got 340 first year.
Members. 340 people wanted to be a part of what we had created. And because of that, and because of the success we had last year with Peggy Ryland as our queen and Billy Hughes as our king, and Billy and I got to participate. He was the captain. I was the grand marshal. Well, this year we're going to do it a little bit different, but we've added more events. so far we've done 3 this year, or the Mardi Gras will be our 3rd event, and we've got 2 more that we've not announced yet. So we have taken one Mardi Gras parade last year and turned it into 5 events that our members get to enjoy throughout the year.
And you know what? Your connection, you sort of got the best event facility, don't you, at the end of that street? Tell about that.
Centennial Plaza is a hidden gem. I mean, it is one of the most magnificent pieces of real estate anywhere on the coast. I mean, there's a lot of nice places. I mean, Go Park campus with USM reminds me a little bit of that. But Centennial Plaza has just got so much potential, and I'm anxiously watching and waiting for it just to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I mean, it's a great story. Here it was, this sort of taken for granted VA hospital, and Katrina hits. It was damaged. Mayor Brent Moore went on a mission, and of course, ultimately, it was donated back to the city. They spent a ton of federal money there to replace windows and help and fix the roofs and make them sort of viable for future buildings. And then, of course, you had this incredible development that started to take place there, and gosh, it's amazing how it all connects together, isn't it?
It does, and it's so I won't say easy, but it's so convenient to have all these pieces that we can plug and play, and the cooperation that we get from so many folks, and the amount of sponsors. The local sponsorship has been phenomenal. Last year we had 13 local businesses sponsor. This year we're at 24. More people want to be a part of it. But one thing that, talking about Centennial, our parade ends there on February 19th. Our parade will start by north of the aquarium between Gulfport PD and the federal courthouse, Dan M. Russell Jr. Federal Courthouse, and we'll roll down 2nd Street, and we end at Centennial. And then we're a little bit different than any other Mardi Gras group or any other association that does a Mardi Gras parade. We have a 3.5-hour concert after the parade that's included as being a member in a group. And Billy, I'll let you tell about the bands we have.
We have a good R&B group. Starts at 2:30. Dee Saunders and Friends. It's a nice soulful sound with horns. Then we have our good friend Mark Schlogel and his group, more rock and roll. And then we close with my good friend Blaine Ashley's Stars Band, who plays all over the coast. So we have 3 bands from 2:30 till 6:30 on. Hopefully we have good weather on Sunday, February 19th.
What a cool deal, man. What a cool deal. And the participation from 2nd Street has exceeded your expectations.
That's it.
And the holdouts, if there are any, probably are thinking twice about it and saying, you know what, I'm joining in. I got to be part of this.
Look, Billy gets mail, and Billy gets mail every day, and I laugh. He says, boy, you go on Facebook a whole lot. I said, you still get mail? He says, every day. So it's working. But, you see the yard sign behind us. You ride down 2nd Street and you count all the houses that have these yard signs in their front yard. I laugh at that every day. It's like, wow, man, these people have bought in. They like it. One of the byproducts that we've been talking about is that feel of community. And I've had realtors, Ricky, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this. I've had competent, prominent real estate agents tell me that what we have done has helped continue to hold the value and increase the value of real estate on 2nd Street. Now, I don't know if I bought that yet, but there are people dialing into what we're doing and want to be on 2nd Street because of it.
No, I buy it completely. And in fact, before you brought it up, I was about to make exactly that point, that the sense of community, if you think about this, that sense of place, how people, it's the emotional connection people have to a place. That sense of place is what makes all these collection of communities so important to coastal Mississippi. Think about downtown Bay St. Louis and downtown Ocean Springs, and just hearing that, what that conjures up in your mind. The same things occurring in 2nd Street, this sense of community. And people want to be part of that. And with that sort of, the more people who want to be part of it, that demand creates value. And that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Hey, we're out of time, but Billy, it's been a great pleasure. You can join me any day. And Matt, as you know, you and I have a long history together. I look forward to having you back, my friend.
February 19th, be on 2nd Street, because it's coming back again for the 2nd year.
Here you go. Hey, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.